Haiti, or Quisqueya, a paradise island with lush tropical mountains and beautiful beaches, was home to the Taino people with their complex societies, intricate craftsmanship, and deeply rooted spirituality. All of this is about to change with the arrival of one man, Christopher Columbus. Born in Italy and driven by a burning desire to find a new route to Asia, Columbus faces a grueling voyage fraught with storms, sickness, and mutiny before finally reaching the shores of the New World. As the Taino and Europeans meet for the first time, a new chapter in history unfolds. What will become of the Taino people? How will their lives change as they encounter these foreign explorers? Embark on a thrilling journey through time to discover the fate of Haiti and its people. The Europeans landed at the site of what is now Môle-Saint-Nicolas on December 6, 1492. Upon arriving on the island of Haiti, Columbus and his crew was welcomed by the indigenous Taino people who were peaceful and receptive to the Europeans. The Taino people were curious about the newcomers, and Columbus was also eager to learn more about their culture. Columbus was captivated by the beauty and natural resources of Hispaniola. He described the island as a paradise, with fertile land, abundant gold, and an agreeable climate. Columbus believed that the island had great potential for colonization and resource extraction, which would benefit Spain and further its imperial ambitions. The island of Hispaniola was divided into 5 distinct chiefdoms or provinces, each with its own cacique, or chief. The 5 chiefdoms were Marin, Magua, Maguana, Zaragoza, and Higüey. Marin was ruled by Guacanagaríx. Magua, located in the northeastern, was ruled by Guacanagaríx. Maguana, in the central part of the island, was ruled by a cacique named Caonabo. This chiefdom was known for its mountains and will become the center of the resistance against the Spanish colonizers. Zaragoza was located in the southwestern part of the island and was ruled by Bohiquio. After Bohiquio's death in the late 1490s or early 1500s, likely due to illness or natural causes, Anacorna, his sister and wife of Caonabo, will become his successor. Higüey, located in the eastern part of the island and was ruled by a cacique named Cayacoa. Guacanagaríx, who ruled over the region of Marin, was one of the first indigenous leaders to encounter Christopher Columbus and his crew when they arrived. He was friendly and cooperative. During the night of Christmas Eve, December 24th to 25th, 1492, while a cabin boy is alone at the helm of the Santa María, the ship ran aground on a reef. The ship was lost, and only the help of the Indians enabled most of the cargo to be landed urgently. Guacanagaríx offered his help and allowed Columbus to establish the settlement of La Navidad within his territory, using the ship's remains for building materials. Columbus had to resolve to leave 39 men behind. He took some natives as prisoners and continued his exploration. He kept sailing along the northern coast of Hispaniola with a single ship until he encountered Pinzon and the Pinta on January 6, 1493. On January 13, 1493, Columbus made his last stop of this voyage in the New World, in the Bay of Rinson in northeast Hispaniola. There he encountered the Ciguayos, the only natives who offered violent resistance during this voyage. The Ciguayos refused to trade the number of bows and arrows that Columbus desired. In the ensuing clash, one Ciguayo was stabbed in the buttocks and another wounded with an arrow in his chest. Because of these events, Columbus called the inlet the Golfo de Las Flechas, Bay of Arrows. Then he headed for Spain. After Columbus departed for Spain, leaving 39 men behind at La Navidad settlement, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The men Columbus left behind were under the command of Diego de Arana and were instructed to maintain good relations with the indigenous Taino people, gather gold, and await Columbus's return. Several factors contributed to the downfall of La Navidad during Columbus's absence. First, the men left behind failed to maintain a respectful and cooperative relationship with the Taino people. Instead, they began exploiting the local population, demanding food and women, and taking resources by force. This behavior created tensions and animosity between the Spanish and the Taino. Additionally, internal conflicts and power struggles among the Spanish settlers weakened the cohesion and effectiveness of the group. The men were ill-prepared to deal with the challenges of living in an unfamiliar environment and lacked the discipline and foresight to establish a sustainable and well-defended settlement. Caonabo, a powerful Taino cacique from the region of Maguana, took advantage of the deteriorating situation at La Navidad. Alarmed by the Spanish presence and the disruption they caused, Caonabo orchestrated an attack on the settlement. The Taino forces overwhelmed the Spanish, resulting in the destruction of La Navidad and the death of all 39 men left behind. When Columbus returned to Spain in March 1493 after his first voyage, he was received with great enthusiasm and interest. His discovery of the New World was seen as a monumental achievement, and he was celebrated as a successful explorer and navigator. Queen Isabela and King Ferdinand were particularly pleased with his discoveries, as they had financed his expedition in the hope of finding new trade routes and valuable resources. Columbus presented the Spanish monarchs with some of the indigenous people he had captured from the New World, as well as various exotic items, such as gold, parrots, and plants, including tobacco. These items further fueled the excitement and curiosity of the Spanish court and the general population. The success of Columbus's first voyage encouraged King Ferdinand and Queen Isabela to finance a second expedition to further explore and colonize the newly discovered lands. Preparations for the second voyage began shortly after Columbus's return to Spain, and this time, the scale of the expedition was much larger. The second voyage was intended to establish a permanent presence in the New World and capitalize on the potential wealth and resources of the discovered lands. The fleet for the second voyage consisted of 17 ships, including both large and small vessels, and carried around 1,200 settlers, including soldiers, farmers, artisans, and priests. The settlers were equipped with various supplies, tools, livestock, and seeds necessary to establish a self-sufficient colony. The second expedition also had a more ambitious exploration agenda, intending to discover new islands and territories in the Caribbean and beyond. When Columbus returned to Hispaniola during this second voyage in November 1493, he discovered the grim fate of the 39 men he had left behind at La Navidad settlement. The settlement was destroyed, and all the men had been killed. Columbus learned from the Taino people, including cacique Guacanagaríx, that the Spanish settlers had behaved poorly, mistreating the locals and seizing resources. This behavior had led to tensions and, ultimately, the attack on La Navidad by the forces of cacique Caonabo. Realizing that he needed to establish a new settlement in a different location, Columbus decided to move east along the northern coast of Hispaniola. On January 2, 1494, he founded the settlement of La Isabela in present-day Dominican Republic. La Isabela was named in honor of Queen Isabella of Spain and was intended to serve as the primary Spanish settlement in the New World. La Isabela faced numerous challenges from the outset. The location was not ideal, as it lacked a suitable harbor, fertile land, and easy access to fresh water. The settlers encountered difficulties growing crops, leading to food shortages and malnutrition. Additionally, diseases brought by the Europeans began to spread among the Taino population, further straining relations between the two groups. Despite these challenges, Columbus continued to explore the surrounding regions and search for sources of wealth, particularly gold. As the situation in La Isabela deteriorated, conflicts between the Spanish and the Taino people escalated. As the Spanish colonizers began to establish a more permanent presence on Hispaniola, they sought to exploit the indigenous Taino people's labor and resources to further their economic and political goals. The Spanish colonizers aimed to extract gold, establish plantations, and develop trade networks, viewing the Taino people as a workforce to be subjugated and controlled. This led to the implementation of forced labor systems, such as the encomienda, which allowed the Spanish to control and exploit Taino labor for their benefit. The harsh conditions, mistreatment, and loss of autonomy experienced by the Taino people under Spanish rule led to growing discontent and resistance among their communities. This unrest gave rise to leaders like Caonabo and Anacorna, who emerged as prominent figures in the Taino resistance against Spanish colonization. From 1494 to 1496, as the Spanish expanded their presence on Hispaniola, Caonabo continued to lead raids and assaults against them. He targeted Spanish settlements, caravans, and mines, seeking to undermine their control and exploit their resources. Caonabo was instrumental in rallying other Taino caciques and their people to resist Spanish colonization. His actions inspired other Taino leaders, such as Guacanagaríx, to join the resistance and defend their lands and way of life against the invading Spanish forces. Caonabo's fierce resistance against the Spanish made him a significant threat, and they were eager to capture him. In 1496, Spanish conquistador Alonso de Ojeda devised a plan to apprehend Caonabo using deception. Ojeda approached Caonabo under the guise of diplomacy, offering him a gift of shiny metal shackles that he claimed were symbols of royalty and friendship. Unaware of their true purpose, Caonabo allowed Ojeda to place the shackles on him. Once secured, Ojeda revealed his true intentions and took Caonabo prisoner. After his capture, the Spanish decided to send Caonabo to Spain, where he was to be paraded as a symbol of Spanish conquest and power. However, Caonabo never made it to Spain. He died during the transatlantic journey, most likely due to the harsh conditions on the ship or illness. The exact circumstances of his death remain uncertain. During his third voyage, on August 19, 1498, Columbus returned to Hispaniola and found settlers rebelling against his rule. In October 1499, he requested a royal commissioner from the court of Spain to help him govern. Francisco de Bobadilla was sent to investigate accusations of Columbus's brutality. Upon arrival, Bobadilla immediately received complaints about the Columbus brothers, declared himself governor, and seized Columbus's property. He reported Columbus's brutal governance to Spain. In October 1500, Columbus and his brother Diego were arrested and returned to Spain, where they were imprisoned for 6 weeks before King Ferdinand ordered their release. The Columbus brothers were eventually summoned to the Alhambra Palace, where their freedom and wealth were restored. However, Nicolas de Ovando in 1502 was to replace Bobadilla and be the new governor of Hispaniola. When Nicolas de Ovando was appointed as the governor in 1502, he was tasked with restoring order to the colony and implementing Spanish law. His tenure as governor witnessed several significant changes. Ovando was known for his strict and disciplined approach to governance. He established a more structured administration, which included the appointment of officials, the implementation of Spanish law, and the establishment of a more efficient tax system. He focused on consolidating Spanish authority on the island and reorganizing its administration to better serve the interests of the Spanish crown. Ovando founded several new towns and settlements on Hispaniola, including Puerto Plata, Santiago, and Concepción de la Vega. These settlements contributed to the expansion of Spanish control over the island and facilitated the extraction of its resources. He continued the harsh policies towards the indigenous Taino people that had been initiated by Columbus. The encomienda system, which had been introduced by Columbus, continued to exploit the Taino people through slavery. The encomienda system granted Spanish settlers the right to demand labor and tribute from the indigenous people, leading to their widespread mistreatment and abuse. Prior to Caonabo's death, his wife Anacorna, the new cacique chief of the region of Zaragua in present-day Haiti, had maintained diplomatic relations with the Spanish in an attempt to protect her people and maintain peace. She even hosted a feast for Bartolomeo Columbus, Christopher Columbus's brother, during his visit to Zaragua in 1497. Despite the resentment, Anacorna continued to engage with the Spanish authorities diplomatically, trying to establish alliances and negotiate favorable terms for her people. However, under Ovando's rule, the situation of her people has worsened significantly. From 1502 to 1503, as Spanish colonization intensified, she found herself facing increasing pressure and betrayal from the Spanish authorities. She eventually turned to resistance, organizing and supporting uprisings against Spanish rule in her region. Ovando was determined to suppress any form of resistance and viewed Anacorna as a significant threat to Spanish control in Hispaniola. He devised a plan to capture her under the guise of diplomacy. Ovando sent an invitation to Anacorna for a meeting to discuss peace between the Spanish and the Taino people. Unaware of his true intentions, Anacorna accepted the invitation, believing that she could negotiate better terms for her people. Upon her arrival at the meeting, instead of engaging in diplomatic discussions, Ovondo's forces arrested Anaquona. She was then put on trial, accused of conspiracy and plotting against the Spanish. The trial was a farce, with little to no evidence presented against her. The proceedings were conducted in a highly dubious manner, with the Spanish authorities disregarding any semblance of fairness or justice. Despite the lack of substantial evidence, Anaquona was found guilty of the charges against her. This verdict demonstrated the Spanish authorities' intent to quash any form of indigenous resistance and solidify their control over the island. Anaquona's trial and subsequent execution served as a stark reminder of the brutal suppression the Taino people faced at the hands of the Spanish colonizers. Guacanagaríx, cacique of Magua, was also captured by the Spanish during the governorship of Ovando in 1502 or 1503. After his capture, Ovando decided to exile him to Spain, along with other rebellious caciques. While being transported to Spain, the ship carrying Guacanagaríx and the other Taino leaders was caught in a hurricane and sank. Guacanagaríx and the other prisoners died in the shipwreck. Guacanagaríx, cacique of Marín, who had a friendly relationship with Columbus and the Spanish, had his influence declined as the Spanish presence on Hispaniola increased and conflicts between the Taino and the Spanish escalated. The exact circumstances and date of his death remain unknown. There is also limited information available about Cayacoa, the cacique who ruled the Higüey region during Christopher Columbus's arrival in 1492. But after his rule, Cotabanama eventually emerged as a prominent leader in the Higüey region and led a resistance against the Spanish. But just like the other Taino leaders, Cotabanama, along with his family, was captured. He will be taken to Santo Domingo and hanged on the orders of Governor Nicolas de Ovando in 1504. The Taino people were subjected to harsh conditions under the encomienda system, forced labor, and exposure to new diseases brought by the Europeans. As a result, their population declined drastically, leaving a severe labor shortage. The Spanish colonizers aimed to exploit the resources of Hispaniola, particularly gold found in the island's rivers and mines. They needed a significant labor force to extract these resources. Additionally, the Spanish introduced cash crops, such as sugar cane, which required a large number of laborers to cultivate, harvest, and process. The indigenous population could not meet this demand due to their dwindling numbers, leading the Spanish to seek an alternative labor source. They looked towards Africa.